Welcome to Charter's Local Edition, coming to you from the state capital of Montana in preparation for the 2015 Montana Legislature. I'm your host, Mark Staples, for Charter, and our guest for this segment is Representative Steve Fitzpatrick, the representative from House District 20 in Great Falls. I do have to cheat a little bit on that because there's 100 House districts. Steve, third term?
Yes.
And elected just recently on Tuesday.
That's right.
By a healthy margin, as I see. And so tell me a little about your personal background, professional, and then how you came to get into politics.
Sure. I was born and raised actually here in Helena, but I've lived in Great Falls about 10 years now. I went to Montana State University and then Arizona State University for where I got my law degree. I practice law in Great Falls. I do a lot of construction law, insurance law, kind of a wide variety of civil litigation. I ran for the legislature back in 2010, and I was been elected 3 times since. The districts have changed a little with the redistricting, but for the most part, it's areas in Great Falls south of 10th Avenue South that I represent. So
obviously, it's appealed to you. The process is the activity that you would come back and run a third time. And so, what have you staked out for yourself in terms of interests? Eventually, people start to lean towards certain areas. Have you done that, or are you still a generalist?
Well, I like to carry a lot of different bills, but I think the areas that interest me the most are kind of the business and labor issues. I'm on that committee. The natural resources and water issues. Again, I'm on that committee. I find that very interesting. And then I also served on local government, which has a variety of issues, zoning and so forth, that are interesting, and you certainly learn a lot. And they're actually some of the more controversial issues we face here at the legislature.
Well, speaking of which, we sent out a questionnaire and said, put what you would like to talk about, and you put one issue, water policy. And I gather you're talking about this thing that's going to be in front of the legislature about the proposed Flathead compact. You want to go through that a little bit for the viewer that might not be familiar with that deal?
Well, I think there's going to be 2 key water policy issues. First of all, we have to deal with the ruling on exempt wells, and we can talk about that in a minute if you'd like. But the CSKT water compact, that's a water compact for the western part of the state. I serve on the water policy interim committee, and we've had a lot of testimony on it. What it is that in the state of Montana, we're going through an adjudication of water rights, and what that means is that people come in and they try and determine what the water right is, and then you'll get a ruling from a court that sets forth the water right. Instead of going through a lawsuit, they've negotiated a settlement with the tribes on the Flathead Indian Reservation.
Which is the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes.
That's right.
Yeah, okay.
There's 3 tribes there.
Right.
And what this does is it quantifies the rights that they'll have both on and off the reservation, which is different from some of the other compacts that have been passed before. There are some elements that are controversial, but I think at the end of the day, it's going to be a good deal for the state of Montana, and particularly the irrigators up in that area.
Yet there are irrigators who are adamantly opposed, at least at this point, and thus the difficulty of this being the issue before the legislature, correct?
Yeah, it is. There's some questions. I think there's some concern about whether people will get as much water as they did currently. But then again, I think one of the big issues, though, is that what is going to be the amount of the rights that the tribes could potentially get if this compact isn't passed. I think there's a lot of concern about big off-reservation rights, which could potentially harm irrigators outside of the reservation in places like the Bitterroot Valley.
Well, yeah, I think that's the theory, particularly of a number of the supporters, is that, well, fine, if you don't approve this compact, then 10,000 water rights are going to go to court statewide because the traditional ancestral lands of these tribes covered most of the state.
Sure.
And so if you don't settle this, every water right in the state of Montana is going to be in court for decades. And that's what some say are at stake, and then others say, well, that's a bluff, and they say, well, no, it's not a bluff. So that's going to be an interesting issue you're going to deal with. What else do you anticipate will be something you'll have to wrestle with?
Well, one of the big things is I mentioned the exempt wells. We have in this state a requirement, or you do not have to go through the permitting process to drill a well if you are under a certain gallon per minute and total acre feet requirement for the year.
Which is usually a domestic level.
Yeah, these tend to be domestic wells. They do get used though for some oil and gas drilling and other uses as well, agricultural uses, particularly if you get into a drought, people will drill multiple wells in the same area. There was a ruling from a district court about a month ago that threw out what was the old standard for exempt wells. And because of that, there's a lot of concern out in the community that people with permitted subdivisions, existing subdivisions, lots for sale, contractors won't be able to now go onto those lots and put in wells. So we're going to have to, I think, come in with some legislation that clarifies how that works. Maybe we'll have to grandfather in the existing subdivisions because, I mean, we could potentially have a taking of land across the state of Montana.
When you say we, do you anticipate Steve Fitzpatrick carries any of those bills?
I don't know if I'll be the carrier, but I certainly will be a supporter and a proponent when it comes through. Definitely.
What do you anticipate the path will be? Do you think you'll get bipartisan support?
I think for the CSKT water compact, I think that will have bipartisan support. I think it will be a hard bill to pass, though. I think there's some strong opposition.
A lot of debate.
There'll be a lot of debate.
What about your exempt wells?
Hopefully we can get that one through. I think the question is more about how exempt wells are used in the future. I would hope that most people would agree that people that were operating or under the belief of the old rule would still be able to use the old rule. I think obviously what it looks like in the future is going to be a healthy debate, and it was last session. We had a Senate bill, and it was hard fought. We got it across the finish line, but it got vetoed by the governor. But
what about the budget surplus, anticipated to be anywhere from 350 to 400 or more? Give it back, keep it, store it. The governor has, at least last time, wanted at least, he likes a $300 million ending fund balance, and we've had some folks on the program say that, oh my gosh, that's too much. Some people say that's safe, and as you know, that's kind of
Sure.
on party lines. Some people say, well, let's have tax reform. Some people, let's pay for Eastern Montana infrastructure improvement. And where are you on that spectrum?
Well, I think my priorities would be, first of all, I think we need to get some money out to Eastern Montana. There's a lot of oil and gas drilling out there. We need to give the people there some resources to deal with the growth impacts. I think that would be my first use of the surplus. I think the second, though, is tax reform. I think we need income tax simplification. The tax code is too complicated, and there's lots of things in there that are not fair. There's essentially a marriage penalty in the tax code. I think that needs to be resolved. So I think those would be the first two things. I think there's going to be enough spending pressure as it is. You're going to have increases, I think, in our Medicaid loads. I've seen we may have to do property tax mitigation because of the reappraisal with agriculture. So there's going to be a lot of new pressure as it is without going into the governor's wish list of spending, and there'll be quite a bit of it, I anticipate.
Well, I appreciate you coming by. I know you got your work cut out for you, but you enjoy it. I've watched you. You're in your own milieu down here, aren't you?
I enjoy it. It's a chance to do something, and people get cynical about government, but you really can make a difference if you get to work and you build relationships and coalitions in this place.
Well, I thank you for serving. I thank you for running. It's pretty thankless, actually. You have to take satisfaction and pride in your work because the general public doesn't give, I think, the thanks to legislators that they deserve for all the sacrifices. So thank you for serving. Thank you for coming by and being on the program.
Thank you.
And thank you all for tuning in to Charter's Local Edition.
Thanks.